Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journey, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2023. And that brings us to a release of a film which already exists in the Criterion Collection physical media catalog on a Blu-ray at spine number 860. But this year, on the occasion of 2023, the Criterion Collection has re-released this title, again at said spine number 860, this time employing the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo format. And I'm speaking of a work which is from the filmmaker Michael Curtiz. And the name of the film is Mildred Pierce. This is the work from the year 1945. Oh, what a great film this is. So engaging, so much, so many things at once, and so entertaining at the same time, and very timeless. This is, of course, from the director Michael Curtiz, and based on the novel by James M. Cain, screenplay Ronald McDougall, and music by Max Steiner. And so many great things, and including the cast, of course. The cast, we have, what a great cast. Eve Arden, Anne Blythe, and also, of course, starring the one, the only Joan Crawford in one of her greatest performances, one of her most memorable performances, and certainly one of her most critically acclaimed performances, and I think for excellent reason, which we'll try to touch upon in our discussion today and a little bit later when we talk about the supplements. And I'm speaking, of course, of this film on the table here, which is the one, the only Mildred Pierce. So much to say, I think, about Mildred Pierce, because it is indeed, a film that is so many things at once. Before we get into that discussion, let me say that, once again, this year, in 2023, the Criterion Collection has re-released this film in the physical media catalog. And I say re-released because, as we know, this film already exists in the Criterion Collection physical media catalog on this great Blu-ray released some years back at spine number 860. And this year, however, we have the occasion of Criterion seemingly employing the 4K UHD physical media format, and that's why we have two discs here. And I'll talk a little bit about my feelings about the way in which the format has been applied here. I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later in this video. As well as other details that emerge when we can compare it, especially with the earlier release from a few years back. Before we get to that discussion, however, let me speak a little bit about this very engaging, fun, and wild film that is so entertaining and so top-notch, and it's contextualized in its time and place, but also very timeless at the same time. And I think that makes for very compelling viewing time and time again. And that's a really great thing. Mildred Pierce. So what we're talking about here, Mildred Pierce, it's in the title. Mildred Pierce is what we can say is the main character, who you can say is the main character here, portrayed with a great deal of complexity by Joan Crawford. And we see Mildred Pierce almost immediately in the throes of what appears to be a very dangerous sort of situation of life and death, type of mystery or murder mystery, which has often been described by many critics and admirers alike, and I think very appropriately, as a type of film noir element or level. And indeed, this film introduces, or we are introduced to the proceedings of the film immediately by such what one might call film noir settings or adornments, or a type of murder mystery, which we see essentially develop before our very eyes, which opens the film. So this is our hook into the world, and by this we have a type of police procedural element that's thrown in, and also a whodunit type of feel that's thrown in as well. And then, of course, we have the main character of Mildred Pierce, front and center in the proceedings. And from here, we have this great way in which this film interweaves, goes back in time, back and forth in time, really, to tell us the story of Mildred Pierce and who she is and where she came from and who are the people that were and are very important in her life. And there is the story of this film, and I think it's been described also by many great scholars and academics and experts, such as, for example, Imogen Sara Smith in the essay, and also some comments as well elsewhere about how this has been linked to the tradition of what she describes as 1930s Hollywood women's pictures or women's films, films that have at their center as the protagonist a female character that is set, the story is set in a type of maybe contemporary setting, sometimes to do with some kind of social or economic related context that provides the backdrop for the main story or the primary story of that individual character per se. And here we have Mildred Pierce, therefore, her story about her maybe her hopes and dreams, and also her ambition, her drive, coming from very humble beginnings. And indeed, perhaps the film presents it as a type of maybe hardship even. But we see Mildred Pierce and the way in which she propels herself and her position and station in life, and indeed her professional and financial ambitions, and indeed her social ambitions as well, is a very important part of her character. It's not like her life is bereft of any hardship. On the contrary, there are many obstacles that seem to be confronting her and perhaps seemingly insurmountable at the same time. But that is part of the appeal and charm and allure and captivating quality, one can say, of viewers watching the story of Mildred Pierce. We watch the story because we want to see her try to figure out how she will succeed, how she will overcome these obstacles, how indeed she will, if possible, attain a type of success, a la what one might call even the American dream, in the context of Hollywood, or I'm sorry, in the context of America during the war. And so this is, I think, a very captivating and it's a contextualized story, but also I think a very timeless story when we think about it in the context of dreams and ambitions and the American dream. This is one aspect. And of course, we see her and her family life, and also her relationships with the various people that she meets, or her friends, her people that she becomes intimate with. And we see the relationships, how they are developed, and how some they become very emotionally satisfying to everyone concerned, or maybe how other relationships maybe are not so emotionally satisfying. And we see romances and relationships form and also break up. And this is also part of the life and times of Mildred Pierce in the hands of the great performance by Joan Crawford, and also the great direction by Michael Curtiz and others. So we see her personal side as well, or her many personal sides. And one aspect, or many relationships, therefore become very important to her. And one such relationship, or an example of a very important relationship, is that with her daughter, Vida. And this is portrayed, of course, by the great Anne Blyth. And we'll get a little bit of her interview when we talk a little bit about the supplements. But one key relationship as well is the mother-daughter relationship. And this also forms, I think, a very intriguing and critical and plot-centric aspect to the film that is also very much part of the character arcs or dynamics. In other words, we see many things, many points of plot converge upon single settings or scenarios or scenes. And I think one way to look at it is that the key relationship, or one of the key relationships between mother and daughter, Mildred Pierce and Vida, this is in many ways a key relationship in the context of how the plot is to move forward in many avenues, and how the character arcs or dynamics are going to be developed or contradicted, or maybe create a sense of clash, or yes, indeed, drama or melodrama. And this is where a lot of the dramatic or melodramatic fireworks stem from, is this very very complex relationship between parent and child on many levels, and that is also affected by, and it affects the many other relationships that we see Mildred Pierce, Joan Crawford's character, form and forge and maintain and protect and maybe disappoint or otherwise betray, perhaps on purpose or not, etc., along the way. And that therefore forms the core or kernel or a primary aspect of Mildred Pierce as a type of drama or melodrama. But I say again, it is also a murder mystery. It is also a film noir. It is also, again, in the words of Imogen Sara Smith and others, great scholars and film critics alike, a type of link to the 30s and 40s women's pictures, Hollywood women's pictures. It's also, in many ways, a type of comeback film in terms of behind the scenes and in the context of Joan Crawford's career. It also is a great convergence of Hollywood talents. I speak of Joan Crawford. I also speak of Michael Curtiz. And that also forms a really important aspect of the discussion of this film, how it serves in the context of Hollywood cinema history during the 1940s, as well as Joan Crawford's career and Michael Curtiz's career, and also James M. Cain as well. We see the way in which this film is adapted. We understand this is also a great example of the art of adapting source material. James M. Cain is also very much well known in Hollywood cinema adaptation speak, as well as indeed Criterion releases as well from the past several months, of course. And here we have Mildred Pierce, which is a great example again of something that is very complex, something that is seemingly, I don't want to say simple. I don't mean that in a derogatory means, but what I mean is it has a way of hooking us in immediately, and it has a way of feeling very accessible and very current and also very understandable, because I think a lot of the situations that we see Mildred Pierce in the hands of Joan Crawford's performance confront, I think, are very understandable and they are very much part of the backdrop that allows us, the viewer, to sympathize with her position, but also see how many things that she has to confront maybe call into question some of the things that she has to do. It maybe calls into question some of the choices that she has made during her life, in terms of her career, in terms of her family, in terms of the relationships, etc. So it's not to say that Mildred Pierce as a character is a wholly, say, 100% correct or righteous or can do no wrong type of portrait. On the contrary, I think the film portrays her in a very complex way, in a way that's nuanced, it's a way that gives us room to view her as a human being. And I think that way of hooking us in, therefore, provides us then with the entry point into this film, which is a world that, I suggest is many genres at once. It has many different focal points as once. As I say, it is a melodrama, it is a romance film, it is a type of a Hollywood drama, it is a quote-unquote women's picture. It is also a film during the war years and part of the Hollywood era or golden age. It was also Michael Curtiz film. It's also a Joan Crawford film. It's a Joan Crawford comeback film in a lot of ways. It is a murder mystery. It is a type of intricate, complex, chronological portrait a la Citizen Kane. It has a type of hard-boiled element to it in terms of the police procedural, almost the crime scene type of feel to it. And it has a type of almost sleazy, and I mean this very positively, to a sleazy, a wonderfully sleazy edge to it that maybe might suggest something under the current that is perhaps a little bit too disturbing for immediacy. And so, but it also presents those points, I think, in a very highly stylized way, in a way that feels very much classical. It also feels very much wonderfully staged and wonderfully arranged, together with the wonderful music and lighting, to give this overall feel of brightness and darkness, of a type of immediacy and surface quality beauty that also hides or perhaps gives way to something underneath that might feel dark. filled with a lot of secrets. This is a film that's also filled with secrets, as well as a film that's filled with ambition. It's also a film that's filled with a lot of heart, and that heart is either satisfied emotionally or heartbroken, or perhaps a mixture of the two, depending on where we find ourselves in the film. And so this is my way to say that this is a wonderful mix, a wonderful, great, entertaining mix of a film, a great Hollywood 1940s film, a great melodrama, a great film noir, and everything in between, starring the one, the only Joan Crawford, directed by Michael Curtiz. And of course, I'm speaking about this film, which is Mildred Pierce. The Criterion Collection has released this film, Mildred Pierce, this year in 2023 at spy number 860, or I should say re-release this film because as we know, or as I've mentioned before, that this already exists in the Criterion Collection under this Blu-ray. And the Blu-ray from some years back was single disc right here, and I've just removed the booklet from the Blu-ray. But just to let you know, for the Blu-ray release, the booklet or the leaflet or the fold-out would go in here on this side of the compartment of the inner workings of the plastic case. And then this year, therefore, we have Mildred Pierce employing the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray format, which is right here. And so this is, excuse me, pardon me for the discs. I begin free, but it would go like this. We have the two discs stacked in this way, one being the Blu-ray, the other being the 4K UHD disc. And the stacking mechanism is such that I don't think, or they don't appear to be touching. So it's that type of dual disc format in this plastic casing that we have seen Criterion employ in previous 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo releases in the past. So that's just something to keep in mind. But again, one disc is the 4K UHD disc, and the other disc being the Blu-ray disc. I should point out that the Blu-ray had the Blu-ray disc, or the Blu-ray release from some years back had the Blu-ray disc in yellow, in this yellow color, whereas, again, for the new 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo, the Blu-ray disc for this is in this black with sort of dark purple tones, and then the 4K disc is in yellow. So that's a little difference, again, if you're interested in that, just to keep that in mind. So as far as the materials, the source materials that are used for the transfer, I should point out that for purposes of the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo, and I've just now taken out the fold-out leaflet, it does say that, and I quote, about the transfer, Mildred Pierce is presented in its original aspect ratio of 1.37 to 1. The digital transfer was created in 4K resolution on a laser graphics director film scanner at Motion Picture Imaging in Burbank, California, primarily from the 35mm original nitrate camera negative. Some sequences, including the entire last reel of the film, were scanned from a 35mm nitrate fine-grain master held by the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and a 35mm safety fine-grain master. On the 4K Ultra HD disc, the feature is presented in HDR, high dynamic range. On the Blu-ray, it is presented in high-definition SDR, standard dynamic range. The monaural soundtrack was remastered from a 35mm soundtrack print, created in 2002 by YCM Laboratories in Burbank from the variable area original soundtrack negative. So that is the information that is again found on the for purposes of this this transfer that is relied upon for this 2023 release. Now, I should point out for the earlier Blu-ray, again, the booklet for the earlier Blu-ray actually indicates the same or very, very similar language in terms of the transfer. So with a few differences here and there, of course, but it does indicate to me that the same transfer is that was used for the previous Blu-ray only release, which was again from 2017, according to the back here, that the materials that were used for the basis of the transfer for this Blu-ray release some years back appear to be the same materials that form the basis of this 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo release from Criterion today. So what does this mean? Again, based upon my own eyes and ears, and again, I've admitted this many times before, and I'll say it again now, I am far from being an expert when it comes to this. I don't have the sort of intellectual wherewithal to be able to figure out and describe exactly in technical terms what the impact that the 4K UHD disc presentation of the film, in terms of the look and sound, how it might impact me in terms of my viewing of the film on the HDR, the 4K UHD disc versus the Blu-ray or the SDR Blu-ray disc. But what I can say, based on my subjective experience, is that I can very, very barely tell any difference in terms of my eyes and ears when I watch the film on the 4K UHD disc versus when I watch the film on the Blu-ray disc here, and also when I rewatch the older release Blu-ray as well. I could tell very, very little. In fact, I would say that I really couldn't tell any difference. And maybe some people who have watched this film and know this film much better than I might be able to detect the difference between the 4K UHD disc version of the film, or not version, but the presentation of the film, as well as the Blu-ray disc look and feel of the film. But I could not. And so I feel like this is therefore I'm very happy with the Blu-ray. I was very, very happy with the Blu-ray before. And that's not to say that I'm not happy with this re-release. On the contrary, if this is an opportunity for people who haven't seen Mildred Pierce yet to want to get this, then by all means get this. And also, if you prefer to rely upon the 4K UHD format in terms of how you watch films, how the player that you prefer to use, etc., then definitely go for it. I mean, this is and I say barely. I can barely tell a difference. I mean, there is a very slight difference I can tell in terms of what my eye can detect in terms of a 4K UHD TV version of the film versus when I watch the Blu-ray disc on the same TV. There is a very, very fine difference, but to me, it's not at all distracting or overly noticeable. And it's not to the point where I would say I definitely prefer, say, the 4K UHD disc over the Blu-ray disc. On the contrary, I prefer neither one over the other. They both seem to be very, not just serviceable, but very excellent to my eyes and ears. So that's my way also to say, therefore, that the Blu-ray, I think, is very, very great. And if you decide you don't want to go for the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo because you already have the Blu-ray, I think that's a really good choice. I can respect that choice, definitely. This is one of those instances where does Criterion do enough to really merit us buying the 4K UHD version, especially when we already have the older or the earlier Blu-ray release version? And in this case, I would say that for me personally, I don't know if it's there's enough there to say that I must definitely get the 4K UHD release. Again, not to say anything against the film, and not to say anything against the 4K UHD look and feel of the film, because it does look really fine and really wonderful. But again, is it something that can put me over the edge to make the purchase? I mean, obviously, because as you can see, I have both versions in front of me in the same room, so I obviously have. But again, I'm doing it because I like to talk about Criterions, and I like to make the purchases, and I do the pre-orders myself, etc. So that's how I do this sort of thing. So, but if I were maybe reconsidering this, and if I were thinking, oh, do I really need the 4K? Maybe in this instance, I would say, oh, I probably have the Blu-ray. I'm okay with the Blu-ray. So if you feel that way, then I think that's a very reasonable position to have, especially when we'll talk about the supplements a little bit later in this video, because they're pretty much the same. So if you feel that way, then please, I don't think, I don't see any strong reason that one must automatically get the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo. Let me put it that way. If you feel differently, that's fine. That's totally fine. But again, these things aren't inexpensive. So if you want to save your money, I think that's a very fine option to have. But at the same time, if you are very much a supporter of the 4K UHD format, and you want to use the equipment and you want to watch your films in that format where available, and if you haven't seen Mildred Pierce yet, or if you don't own it on the Criterion disc, and if you've been looking to make the purchase, I think this is your opportunity. This is a great opportunity to get this, the 2023 re-release, the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity and a wonderful way for you to enjoy this film, which is Mildred Pierce. And so now let us talk about the supplements that can be found with respect to this release of Mildred Pierce. Once again, I'd like to say that we have two discs here, the 4K UHD disc and then the Blu-ray disc. The film can be found on either such discs. But when we talk about the supplements, we're going to talk about what can be found on the Blu-ray disc, So the Blu-ray disc that is included with this 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo has the supplements, which I'm about to talk about. And they can also be found in this earlier release from some years back. So the Blu-ray supplements that we found here can also be found on this new 2023 release, the Blu-ray disc thereof. So what are those supplements that we had before and which we still have now? First up is a discussion between Molly Haskell and Robert Polito. This is described as being from the year 2016. It's 22 minutes. And this is a type of appreciation of Mildred Pierce, the film. And this is really great. They speak about, for example, how the film might appear, maybe in the grand scheme of things, to have been somewhat underappreciated. That's their phrase. And that the reassessment or reappraisal of this film over the years has really garnered a wonderful critical reappraised assessment, thus bringing a wonderful spotlight on this film and a great examination. And that examination gives us wonderful detail. For example, reading this film in various modes of, say, genre or categorization. So they, I think, very astutely mention how this film can be seen as a mystery film, and also as a mystery film as to who Mildred Pierce is, as well as a mystery film as to who done it in terms of the murder and the crime, etc. And so that also, I think, is another way to say this film can be said to be, again, a type of, in the tradition of the Hollywood 1930s women's pictures that they mention here, also is mentioned by Imogen Sara Smith, and also the mystery or film noir element, the voiceover film elements, which give it a sense of that urgency in the context of film noir, a type of what is at the heart of the mystery, which again is very much like Citizen Kane, which is mentioned here. And also the way in which of course we have Mildred Pierce front and center, but also the various male characters that that are very important in the context of the story and in the context of her life as we see as part of the story backdrop of Mildred Pierce, the film, and also the very important aspect of James M. Cain and the idea of book versus film, again, the art and craft of adapting source material for the film, or for purposes of creating the film, and also the idea that has certain elements of, say, the film noir language that are also evident in other, say, similar works, like Double Indemnity is also mentioned here, so it's great. And also, again, the key, or one of the key relationships, perhaps if not the key relationship, is the mother-daughter relationship here. So that's Vida and Mildred. So, and that's mentioned here, I think, very well. And then also the sort of convergence of many talents at once. I think primarily spoken here is the convergence of Joan Crawford and Michael Curtiz and James M. Cain. And so this type of crossroads, if you will, and the professional relationships between and among these various figures. For example, Joan Crawford and Michael Curtiz, I think, is also highlighted as well, and how this film is very significant in the context, again, going back to Joan Crawford, very significant in the context of Joan Crawford's career, especially the types of sort of quote-unquote critical flops that she had been seeing in her career prior to her participation, and a real critical and commercial success with this film, Mildred Pierce, and we'll talk a little bit about that when we talk about some of the other supplements. So this is really great. This is a really great discussion, and we had it before in the earlier Blu-ray release, but we're having it again now, and that is wonderful. So if you haven't seen this, it's a great place to go for further information about Mildred Pierce and also about Joan Crawford, Michael Curtiz, etc., so James M. Cain, etc. So film noir, various readings of this film, because again, it's a film that I think has many possibilities in terms of how to read this film. So wonderful discussion. This is approximately 22 minutes. And then next up we have Joan Crawford, the Ultimate Movie Star. This is a 2002 documentary by Peter Fitzgerald, Turner Classic Movies, and narrated by Angelica Houston. This is totaling approximately 1 hour and 27 minutes. Once again, we did see this included in the earlier Blu-ray, but it's great to have this because one of the key elements of this film, Mildred Pierce, it is so key, it's so critical, unavoidable. This is part of the fabric of Mildred Pierce, the film, the identity of the film. That is Joan Crawford. And so to get, I think, a great appreciation of Mildred Pierce, the film, I think one place to be able to do that is to get an understanding of Joan Crawford, her biography, her life, her career in Hollywood as a movie star, both leading up to Mildred Pierce and also after Mildred Pierce, and not just her life as a movie star, but her life, her personal life as well. So I'm again far from being an expert when it comes to Hollywood Golden Age movie history, and I'm far from being an expert when it comes to the life and times and biography details and career details of Joan Crawford. But what I can say is I understand that Joan Crawford is very iconic, is very much a movie star, is one of the most famous movie stars from Hollywood's history ever, and also very complex and a very complex figure. Let me put it that way. And those elements do emerge in many parts of the discussions of Joan Crawford's biography, including certain details that emerge in this documentary. And in that way, I think this documentary serves as a great introduction to the career of Joan Crawford and also the life of Joan Crawford. And it does provide, I think, further ability for people who are interested to want to pursue more research and study into the life and times of Joan Crawford. I mean, it has all this. So it's a great way to further supplement one's appreciation of this film, Mildred Pierce. And one of the ways we can do that is to see the relatively humble beginnings of Joan Crawford as a type of emerging film star who wasn't yet the A-list top billed actor on the marquee yet. We see her slowly, her career slowly but surely begin to gain momentum during the days of Lucille Lesueur, and then later into Joan Crawford, of course, and then talking a little bit about her family and her parents and the relationship with her parents, and also her relationships with a lot of the men in her life. Those are also figured in here because not only does it form a basis for maybe a possible understanding as to Joan Crawford's own personal and private life, but also these relationships, we understand, many of which were very much part of very, very public relationships, oftentimes with figures who were known in the Hollywood film industry. And they also formed part of, and I don't mean this negatively, but they also formed part of who Joan Crawford's personal persona was, as well as her own private or public persona was, as well as her own private personal persona. So I think these her relationships are also very much very important to her, and she, I think, acknowledges this to a certain degree when we get to a different supplement, her one-on-one interview with David Frost. So we'll get to that a little bit later. But so this is, again, very fascinating stuff indeed. And then we also chart her career, her many key films that she was emerging in, and she found stardom with a lot of her films, especially in her early career, her on-screen and perhaps even off-screen relationship with Clark Gable as well, and the films that they made that were very, very popular indeed. And then, of course, we understand that she experienced a bit of what one might call a commercial success drought, in a manner of speaking. And she wasn't finding as much success as she had seen in her earlier days. And so it was in this period, maybe quote-unquote, relatively speaking, lack of momentum, that Mildred Pierce came along. And so this was a very important part of her career, both in terms of a quote-unquote comeback, but also not just a comeback, but a huge declaration. Both commercial and critical acclaim and success found Joan Crawford and her performance with Mildred Pierce very, very critically acclaimed performance indeed. So this is again, many things I think go along with this. Again, she has this type of persona, her on-screen persona and her behind-the-scenes persona. Working with actors, with fellow actors, and also crew members, and also directors. Some mentioning of some of the directors he's worked with, such as Michael Curtiz, excuse me. There's mentioning too of many anecdotes of how she treated the crew very, very well, and she wanted to get to know them on a kind of first name basis. At the same time, certain details begin to emerge about her family life and her family life with her close knit family, relatives, and children as well. So this also becomes part of the Joan Crawford on-screen, off-screen persona, legend, nightmare, depending on one's view of it, of course. But this is also referenced here in this, I think, very, very well-rounded documentary. And it's incredibly, I think, it's very, how should I put it? It has this direct nature to it, especially when you get into the second half of the documentary, when you get to aspects of Joan Crawford's life and career post Mildred Pierce. Very fascinating, and some episodes in her life that are quite revealing and very sensitive, and also very much part of her Hollywood career or her film career during the latter part of her filmography, of course, but those are touched upon as well. So these and other points, I think, make this documentary, I think, must-see viewing. Again, to watch Mildred Pierce, the film, I think one of the places that one might want to go is an understanding of the life and times of Joan Crawford herself, because as much as we see the story and the on-screen relationships between Vida and Mildred and the murder mystery and the film noir elements of the film, we also understand that behind the scenes as well, there's a lot of stuff going on, so that it becomes a very full-bodied viewing experience indeed. I think thanks in large part to an understanding of the life and times of Joan Crawford, which you can get, for instance, in many areas, such as this great TCM documentary, Joan Crawford, the Ultimate Movie Star. So it's an hour and 27 minutes. It's its own full feature-length documentary in itself. So please check it out if you haven't already. Next up, we have David Frost and Joan Crawford. This is described as being from January 1970. It's approximately 15 minutes. And here we have Joan Crawford going on, being interviewed by David Frost, and talking about many things here. Talking, for instance, about it's from the David Frost Show, talking about her favorite role and what her favorite role is in her illustrious career. And she mentions Mildred Pierce. She mentions working with Michael Curtiz. She mentions Anne Blythe. She mentions the Oscars. She mentions Clark Gable, and a very interesting response to a question, Clark Gable and Spencer Tracy, etc. So a lot is mentioned here. There's also a sense of Joan Crawford, the person, and her manner. With David Frost's question, it has a nice, pleasant feel about it, the atmosphere, and also she does touch upon Mildred Pierce, and she does touch upon some of those details, which I think are very relevant, especially after coming off of a watch of the documentary, the feature-length documentary, the Ultimate Movie Star TCM documentary that I was just mentioning a moment ago. You watch that, and you can watch this interview from 1970, and a lot of things that she mentions are things that are brought up in the documentary. So very interesting stuff indeed. So please check this out if you can. It's approximately 15 minutes. And then next we have Anne Blythe, Q&A session in San Francisco. And this is described as being from 2006, moderated by Ed Mueller, approximately 23 minutes. And so here we have Anne Blythe, who of course plays the key role of Vida in the film, and here she has a wonderful time interacting with the moderator and also people in the audience. She's on the stage, and she talks about how she got cast in the role of Mildred Pierce, what was it like working with, on the set with Michael Curtiz and also with Joan Crawford, etc., and all these details, the sort of juicy details, as it were, of working on the set of a film like this with a star like that. So, and other details that do emerge. So, Anne Blythe is, again, her performance is electrifying. It's dynamic. It is very complex. The character that she portrays in this film is very complex indeed. And it forms one part of the key relationship, that between mother and daughter. that forms, I think, one of the great hearts and souls of the film. And we can say that if it's a film that has many hearts and souls, one of the primary beating ones is the mother-daughter relationship. So Anne Blyth's Q&A here, which we got before, now we're getting again for this re-release. Please check it out if you can. Again, totaling 23 minutes. And that's not all, because then we have a brief a 1969 Hugh Downs discussion with the one and only James M. Cain. So James M. Cain, of course, is very significant in the context of Mildred Pierce, the story, the writing, and and James M. Cain is also a very famous writer, and I love James M. Cain's stories. I've read his books since I was younger, so loved reading his stuff since I was a kid, or when I was a kid, really. So to watch this is where I saw it before in the earlier Criterion release, but now I see it again. It's great stuff to watch. I wouldn't necessarily call it Mildred Pierce centric. It's not really focusing on Mildred Pierce per se, but I would say it's focusing. You get a sense of who James M. Cain is. You get a sense of the mannerisms, the aura, the type of electricity that his personality gives off, and the types of questions that are asked you. So it's a great insight into who James M. Cain is, if anything. So please check this out if you can. Again, the brief interview with James M. Cain it's described to him from '69. And then rounding off the supplements, we have the trailer that's included. So here we have, therefore, a kind of brief assessment of what we can find on this new re-release of the 4K UHD Blu-ray combo on the Blu-ray disc, which again mirrors what we got on the earlier Blu-ray only disc release from some years back. So again, I understand we're not getting anything new per se in terms of supplements, but what we did get before was great, and so it's great to have those great supplements which we got before, which were great then and are great now. So that's a lot of greats in that sentence. So, but I mean that very purposefully, because I do want to emphasize that although we're not getting anything new, what we do get is so, I think, informative and illuminating and very packed with information, and it touches upon a lot of the things that I think are really necessary for a good grounding, a good jumping off point into a further exploration and research and cinema journey discovery of the work of Mildred Pierce. I think, if anything, maybe what might have been interesting is maybe having a little bit more discussion of, say, the life and times of Michael Curtiz. That might have been interesting. We don't get anything Michael Curtiz centric, I would say. It might have been interesting to have that, although we do touch upon a number of comments about Michael Curtiz and where his career was, and working with Joan Crawford, etc., in some of the supplements, the Ultimate Movie Star TCM documentary, for example. So it's not like it's Michael Curtiz bereft of anything, but we do get comments about that. But perhaps it would have been interesting if we had something that was Michael Curtiz centric. But that could also be said to be a very minor criticism of the earlier Blu-ray release, of course. But that aside, I think what we had before was great in terms of supplements, and if we get the same supplements which are great then, they are still great now. So please check out those if you haven't already. Again, part of the Blu-ray that's included with this 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo, this 2023 release of Mildred Pierce. So now let's round out our conversation by talking about the packaging and the cover art and the insert, the fold-out, the essay, etc. And so again, what we have here is the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo edition. And again, we open it up and we can see on this side, this would be the place where the insert would be housed. On the other side, we have the two discs. This is the two-disc compartment mechanism that's, I think, standard in this plastic case type that Criterion often uses. We've seen this type in the past. I have here also the previous Blu-ray only release, again, which has I've shown it before, but it has the Blu-ray only packaging there as well, the storage compartment system there as well. As you can see, there is very little, I think, in terms of noticeable change in dimension or size of the case itself. And indeed, I think that holds true for the cover art as well. The cover art is pretty much identical from what we had before. It's a really great cover art. I love the use of the font, etc. And I love the artistic design, which we'll see also carried over into the leaflet, which I'll again talk about momentarily. Please note that art director Sarah Beebe, designer Eric Skillman, art production coordinator William Brazy are credited here. So I love this kind of design. It was great before, but it's nice to have that continuity here again as well. If I could say just one very, very minor thing, I do notice this every now and again. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe it has to do with the way it was shipped, or I'm not sure. Maybe it's out of Criterion's control. But you can see the plastic cover. There's a little bit of a type of warped aspect to the actual plastic film that's part of this casing. I don't know if you can tell, it has a little bit of a rippled effect, and I'm not sure why that is. You don't get that rippled effect here with the earlier Blu-ray, which has a type of flat feel to it, this earlier Blu-ray, but here it has a type of rippled look to it. I'm not sure if that wrinkling effect has some kind of something to do with air pressure or something when it's shipped overseas and the like. Sometimes, every now and again, I'll have a Criterion new Blu-ray or something, which will have this slight rippled effect on the plastic, and I'm not sure exactly why that is. But again, it's a very minor thing. It's not cause for me to ask for a replacement or anything like that. But when you do your Criterion shopping, if you are concerned about this type of thing, of course, be sure to try to make sure, to the extent you're able to see if the plastic film itself is of a greater quality that is to your satisfaction as the ultimate consumer. Just notice that. Again, I'm okay with it. So, but it's not unnoticeable. Let me put it that way. So, there's that aspect of it as well. Now, if we go to the insert or leaflet, I should point out that the insert or leaflet here, which is for the Blu-ray, or the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo here, does appear to be pretty much the same as what we got with the earlier Blu-ray release. So this is, in my hand here, this is the Blu-ray release leaflet, and here is the new 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo leaflet as well. And aside from very minor differences in discussions of the transfer, I think that, to my eyes, everything else seems to be pretty much the same from one earlier leaflet version to the other leaflet version. So we have the great layout and the art that is, again, that mother-daughter relationship. That's part of the great aspect of this. So it's right there in the great artwork. And then it's a fold-out type. So I'm not a fan of the fold-out type, as I've mentioned many times before. I wish it could have been a staple booklet before. It would have been nice, for instance, as a type of quote-unquote upgrade from the Blu-ray only released from some years back to this now 2023 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo. Maybe the Criterion could have done something a little bit extra, maybe added another writing, or maybe made this into a staple booklet. Who knows? That might have been interesting, but it is pretty much the same, or it is exactly the same, save for a few minor points about the transfer in terms of the writings. But what's great about that is what we had before and what we get now is Imogen Sara Smith's A Woman's Work essay. The title is called A Woman's Work. And this is really great. Imogen Sara Smith's work, I think, is exceptional. It's always exceptional. There's never I mean, it's always great. Always great. Whenever she appears on supplements and discussions, it's great. And when she provides essays like this essay called A Woman's Work, this is really, really great. This is one of the best from any prior Criterion release, and we're getting it here again. So we got it before, and we're getting it now. So once again, please check out Imogen Sara Smith's great essay. It's called A Woman's Work. My strong suggestion is, as with prior essays, to please first watch the film Mildred Pierce, because the essay, I think, is written based on the understanding that the reader will have already seen the film Mildred Pierce, or will at least have an understanding of what the film is about, including the ending, etc. So please watch the film first, but then after you've seen the film, you can check out the great essay by Imogen Sara Smith. It's one of the great contributors to Criterion supplements and sort of academic materials and informative materials. Whenever you see Imogen Sara Smith's name, yes, you should always watch that supplement or listen to that interview or read the essay. This is always packed with information, such as this great one that she provides regarding Mildred Pierce. So please check that out as well if you can. So I think, in conclusion, I should say that, once again, the earlier Blu-ray, I think, is really very sound, very high quality, and I don't see any huge monumental difference in terms of the high nature of the quality from the earlier Blu-ray disc versus what we see now with this new 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo. So will this mean that maybe some people may or may not purchase, or maybe if you already have the Blu-ray, you might feel like you don't need to make this extra purchase of the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo. Or perhaps you really love this film so much and you really want to have many versions of this film, or you haven't seen this film yet but you want to, and you are a 4K UHD person, and so now this is your opportunity. If you feel that way, then of course, I'm very, very happy to hear that, because this would be a great opportunity for you to get this purchase and watch this film, Mildred Pierce. So however you feel, my dear friends, it's always a complex topic. I think at the end of the day, it's ultimately your decision. So please, of course, you do what works for you, because you are the ultimate arbiter and you make the ultimate choice as to what you need and how you will respond to and engage with cinema. But no matter what your choice is, no matter how you decide to engage with this film, I really do hope that you have engaged with this film, or if not, you are interested in watching this film for the first time, or you have the opportunity to watch it many, many times again, because ultimately it comes down to the film, and what we are getting is a great presentation, high quality presentation of a film that is very high quality, very entertaining, very much a type of genre bender, wild, extravagant work that's also very intimate, and it's a murder mystery, it's also a human drama, it's a family drama, it's a drama about relationships, about success and failure, the American dream, Joan Crawford at the center of the proceedings, directed by Michael Curtiz. Who could ask for anything more? This is one of the best. This is the film, which is Mildred Pierce. All right, my dear friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great, great, great movies, including Mildred Pierce. So until the next video, my dear friends, stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.